Welcome, everyone, to this week's edition of OPP Watch as CF Montreal prepares themselves for the biggest game of their season, one of their biggest game of the season, against Toronto FC for the Derby in the Canadian Championship tomorrow night. This week, we are joined by John Molinaro, a founder of the TFC Republic and contributor to Sportsnet, to give us a preview of the match tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today, John?
Yeah, really good. Thanks for having me.
All right. You excited for tomorrow? How you feeling? How's the weather in Toronto?
Weather's nice. It's about plus 14, sunny.
Ugh.
So I don't know. We'll see if that's calling for rain tomorrow. So we'll see if that sort of stays away. But no, it's doing quite nicely here in Toronto.
We actually got really, really bad thunderstorms today, so I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh man, please don't do it, don't go away, power." But yeah, so let's get started. A little bit of a crazy offseason for TFC with all the drama surrounding the club, with the change of coaches and the DP and the drama of the DPS. I'm going to call it what it is. What was the fans' vibes and expectations heading into 2025?
I think there was a lot of. Hmm. I mean, it's weird. I mean, I think there's a mix of expectations because the club has failed to make the playoffs for 4 years in a row. And for a team that, was once the best side in MLS, that's really unacceptable to a pretty demanding fan base. So I think even though I think everyone recognizes like the team has struggled over the years, there's still expectations for them to be competitive or to at least, improve this year. Um, at the same time, I think there is an understanding that it's a new coach, while who has accepted it, who has sort of taken over a team that isn't all that different from last year. There
Hmm.
was some offseason roster additions, but it wasn't a retooling of the squad. It's pretty much, as I said, with the exception of a few guys coming in and some guys leaving, it's essentially the same team. So I think people also understand that this is going to be a work in progress, that it's going to take time. So it's a weird dichotomy between those two positions.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said, it's pretty much the same squad, but Toronto's FC right now are right above CF Montreal in the MLS standings with one win, four draws, and five losses. How would you summarize first year coach Robin Fraser's season so far?
I think it's gone about as well as expected. I mean, I appreciate that it's only one win in 10 games, but I don't think the team is as bad as its record suggests.
Hmm.
When you look at those 10 games, they haven't been blown out in any of those contests, right? They've all been, with the exception of the 4-2 loss to Orlando, they've all been pretty tight. Um, I think the team is involved. When you look at the first 5 games, they gave up 12 goals. They were just sort of like really leaky at the back. Since then, the next 5 games, they've only given up 2 goals. They held Inter Miami to 1 goal in Miami, and they've recorded shutouts over, Salt Lake, which is not an easy place to play in Utah. They shut out Vancouver, who is the best team in MLS, and they shut out Minnesota United, who was one of the best teams from the Western Conference. So I think there's been progress, and I think Robin has really, as a former MLS Defender of the Year on 2 occasions, he's really sort of put the focus on being defensively sound, and just sort of the defensive structures that he's put on place has been his sort of focus. Now that seems to have settled down, and there's sort of the defensive sort of identity of this team has kind of come to fruition. I think the next part is getting, adding that sort of attacking element to it, because, they've been quite poor. Not as poor as Montreal in attack, but still pretty poor. I mean, with 8 goals, that's clearly not enough of an offensive record to build anything substantial on. So I think becoming more decisive and just sort of dangerous in the final third is sort of the next step that this team has to make.
Absolutely, and a lot of the things you say that John are actually they sound a lot like CF Montreal. Honestly, the struggles and the progress and all that, and the word we always get from the press conferences is from both the coaches and the staff. John is very much like we're almost there, we're almost there, we're about to click, we're about to get to it. Right? Is that the same kind of you know I guess vibe you're getting from the locker room from the players as they every game pass? Because you did say that they had some pretty impressive. games the past few weeks. Is that the kind of message the players are sending out from the locker room for Toronto?
Not quite. I mean, I think the message is that there's been improvement, but you don't hear like the players saying, or the coaches or the staff for that matter, talking about we're almost there, like we're almost going to turn the corner. That I think they've all been very cautious to say, like, while there has been improvement and there has been an evolution, that this still remains a work in progress, and there's still, a fair bit of work to do. So I think they've been very good about sort of ramping things down and not getting ahead of themselves and saying things that could potentially come back to sort of bite them in the ass. They've been really
Yeah.
sort of careful with the messaging, and I think rightfully so. I mean, when you look at it, it's not just around the corner. They're not just there. It's going to take some time, and I think they haven't really strayed from that message in any significant way.
Right. And today, I'm sure you're aware of this, John. There's a lot of connections between CF Montreal and Toronto FC with either players and staff alike. There's Jaquil Marshall-Ruddy, there's Luca Petrasso, Corey Ray, Prince Owosu, the list goes on. Both teams have had their fair share of struggles, as you mentioned earlier. CF Montreal has also had terrible, terrible past seasons, except for 2022. Do you think that the rivalry, this is a question that we actually asked ourselves here at The Ball is Round, John. Do you think that the rivalry still exists between TFC and CF Montreal?
Oh, I think so. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can't speak for Montreal, but just sort of being around, TFC, this still matters to them. Even though both teams are struggling this year, there's just sort of a natural animosity between the two sort of teams. And speaking to Robin Fraser today after practice, he mentioned that with there being a lot of new players in the team, that maybe not everybody understands the significance
Hmm.
of the rivalry with Montreal, and so he was going to planning on having Jonathan Osorio, TFC's captain, a Toronto native and the longest serving player in the team's history, to sort of deliver the speech to the rest of the players who maybe aren't familiar of why this is such a big deal. So that way they have no sort of misunderstanding about, this rivalry and why it's important. So yeah, it's still hugely important for Toronto FC, the
Yeah.
rivalry against Montreal.
And that's the thing, because they actually, Joel Waterman in his press conference today was also saying he's not from Montreal. He's been one of the longest serving players now, but he understands it. He gets it. He's not a Montreal native, but he has to explain to the players, the newcomers, that hey, you know what? This game is not just another Saturday, right? It's an important one. And the what we had discussed at the Ballers Round, we said, the fans get it. The fans understand the rivalry. I think they do, but the players, it's a little more complex, right? Because again, there's a lot of connection between the two. But as you said, I guess they're in the Toronto, it's a natural animosity, and it's easier to teach from somebody that's there. But CF Montreal's first game in the Canadian Championship is against TFC, and the Bleu Blanc Noir have emphasized the importance of this tournament and getting a trophy. This was since the beginning of the year. The president Gabriel Gervais mentioned that many have named it CF Montreal's most important game of the 2025 season. How important is this game for TFC, John?
Likewise, very important. I mean, Robin Fraser has said, we're not sort of brushing this tournament aside. It's important for the club because, they're the most successful team in the history of the Canadian Championship. But, they haven't won it for whatever it is, 4 years now. I mean, the Vancouver Whitecaps have really kind of won the last three in a row. So I think it's important for the club to get back to the point where it's lifting trophies. And this is, I would suggest the easiest, or sort of the quickest route to filling the trophy case, again, is to winning the Canadian Championship. Say nothing of the fact that it serves an entryway back into the CONCACAF Champions Cup, which is something that Toronto wants to get back
Hmm.
into being a part of, because it was a regular participant in that tournament, during its glory days. So, yeah, this is really important for TFC. They're not sort of putting it to the side. They're not overlooking it in any sort of sense. This is an important sort of tournament for them.
Okay. So let's talk about tomorrow's game. John, we did ask you to give us your predicted lineup. If you want to go ahead and just kind of name and give us the names and the formation. And also, John, based on this, on your predicted lineup, what should CF Montreal expect from Toronto FC tomorrow?
Yeah, so I mean, I think Luca Gavrin is going to start in goal. Sean Johnson has started all 10 games in MLS. He didn't practice today, so I think it's pretty clear that Luca Gavrin is going to start. Um, Lazar Stefanovic and Kobe Franklin are two young Canadian players who haven't received a lot of playing time this year. So I think Robin Fraser is going to turn to them, for this game. Sigurd Rosted, which has probably been one of TFC's most consistent players this year. So I expect him to sort of anchor things in the middle of the defense. Nixon Gomes has been had some injury problems, but I think he's going to be available tomorrow, so he should see some playing time. Jonathan Osorio obviously has been, TFC's longest serving player and is the club's captain. And I suspect that he's going to partner Alonso Coelho in the center of midfield rather than Maxime Dominguez or Debbie Flores. And then Robin is probably going to play a front three across the middle of Italian DPs Federico Bernardeschi and Lorenzo Insigne, counterbalanced with Canadian international Theo Carbianu. And Ola Brynjelsen is the Norwegian forward that they signed at the beginning of the season. Coming off a lower body injury, he's kind of floated in and out of the starting 11 this year. He hasn't really got a good run of game just because of injury and fitness issues. So this is going to be a big occasion for him tomorrow. I suspect that he's going to start. If not, then he'll at least come off the bench. So it's going to be really interesting because, as I said, TFC have really struggled to score goals, not necessarily create chances. So I'm really interested to see if they can, put it together in such a high profile and important game against Montreal.
Right. And based on this lineup and what you've seen so far, John, what would you say is Toronto FC's strength this season?
Well, defensively, I mean, they've, as I said, they were defensively suspect at the beginning of the year, but I mean, when you look at the last 5 games, they've been pretty tight at the back. They haven't really given away much. They've kind of kept things like the opposing attackers in front of them. They haven't. Rarely do you see opposing teams getting in behind them. I think they've been helped out by the play of Debbie Flores in central midfield and Jonathan Osorio.
Hmm.
So I think it'll be, if Toronto is going to win this game, it'll be, largely because they keep Montreal off the score sheet and maybe they can nick a goal, whether it be on the counterattack or from open play or on a set piece. So it's really the defense over the last month or so that has really has been TFC's calling card.
Okay. And is there anything in particular that maybe any weaknesses that TFC might have that maybe Montreal could exploit tomorrow?
I can't think of anything where I can point to and say this is like something that Montreal can exploit.
Yeah.
I think it's more along the lines of Montreal having to just take advantage of whatever chances they do get,
Okay.
whether that be from open play or from set piece situations, because I don't think Toronto is going to sort of give away much if the last 5 games are any indication.
Okay. And is there a player that you're watching tomorrow? Obviously not the DPs, the obvious Bernadeschi's and Insigne are everybody's watching them, but is there a player to you that you're keeping an eye on? Maybe a young player or
Well, I'm assuming that he starts. I think Ola Brynjelsen is kind of like the player to watch just because, as I mentioned, he signed prior to the season and he signed like a targeted allocation money deal. So, he cost them some money. And he hasn't really gotten sort of into the rhythm of things because of injury and fitness issues. When he has played in limited playing time, he's looked really sort of like a really intelligent player with his runs, especially off the ball, and just
Mhm.
being able to create space for others. So it'll be interesting to see if he starts, whether he can, operating with a full game ahead of him, if he can kind of finally break out and show, what he's capable of. Because Robin Fraser said, once he does sort of get regular playing time, we're firmly going to see what he's all about and that he can be a dangerous player for Toronto. So, I mean, this is a perfect opportunity to begin that process for him.
Absolutely. Okay. And we do like to ask our visitors, our guests, what is your score prediction for tomorrow?
I think it'll go to a penalty shootout, and I think Toronto will
Oh,
probably pull it out like 3-2 or something like that.
I am not a fan of penalty shootouts. I'll just tell you in general, I am not a fan of but I can understand why.
I
Now,
just don't. I just with the way both teams are like from their attacking
mhm.
records, I just think they're going to be hard pressed to find a goal through 90 minutes of regulation
It
time.
makes
So,
absolute sense. I mean, they're both feeling the same way. They both kind of had similar seasons,
like,
and it's going to be so hard to say who can definitely win this game. It's not it's crazy to think of it that way, right? But
mhm.
anything goes once the whistle is blown. Now we do have a lot of guests that are gonna, well, guests, the fans that are gonna go over to Toronto to watch the game and all that. John, out of the top of your mind, you're hungry. It's late at night. You're just starving. What's the first place you think of to go get something to eat in Toronto?
Oh wow. Well, there's actually this Turkish place, Turkish grill called Turquoise. It's on Richmond Street. It's basically on the corner of Richmond and Spadina. I don't know how. I think they're open late. But no, they do really good sort of like Turkish like grilled meats and kebabs and sort of falafels and stuff like that. So it's really really good.
All
Highly
right.
recommend it. And the dips are sensational. They'll do like hummus and baba ganoush and um, there's like a beet dip that I really like and a roasted tomato one. So it's just really really good food.
All right, man. Hey, that sounds amazing. All right, John. Look, thank you so much for joining us, joining the Ball is Round for the Op Watch. Where can our listeners find you for everything Toronto?
At on Twitter at John Molinaro, all one word, and then TFC Republic is the pay subscription site that I run with all things Toronto FC, and that's just at tfcrepublic.ca. Really reasonable to subscribe to, really reasonable subscription rate. So and we offer a free 7-day trials as well, so people can sort of try it out before deciding whether they want to plunk down money to subscribe to it.
All right. Well, thanks so much, John. And usually at this part, John, I say, may the best team win. But in this case, I'm just going to say, may CF Montreal win.
Fair enough.
Just kidding. All right. Well, thank you so much again, John. Appreciate it.
Sure.